Good morning, guys. Today's lesson is on the Transcontinental Railroad in your standards. Now, the Transcontinental Railroad made it easier and faster for people to travel and to ship goods. And we talked about that when we discussed westward expansion and why people moved west and the various ways that they could move west, which was either, by the wagons. Some people rode the railroad, different things. So we're going to watch a short video.
Why did the early American people build a railroad? Who built the railroad? How did it help the people in Utah? The United States decided to build a railroad that would go all the way across the country. It would be called the Transcontinental Railroad. Two companies would build it. One started from Nebraska and worked west, while the other started in California and worked east. It took many people to build the railroad. Most of them were immigrants and did not speak English. It was very hard work and very dangerous. The workers worked through hot summers in the desert and cold winters in the mountains. Many people died while working on the track. In 1869, the two rail lines met at Promontory, Utah. The last railroad spike was made of gold. It is known as the Golden Spike. The news was sent across the nation. After the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, many other railways were built throughout Utah. Pretty soon, people were able to travel anywhere around the state by the train. After the railroad came to Utah, many black men worked for it. They would work in the construction by building and repairing it, or work as cooks and waiters. The railroad made it possible to travel from coast to coast in only 6 days. Before the railroad, it would take about 100 days by covered wagon. They could buy things from other cities and sell their things. The building of the railroad was a huge success.
All right. Now, while viewing the video, why was the railroad built? Who built it? And how did it help people? Okay. We're going to read a short article, and this comes from Duxters.com about the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay. The first Transcontinental Railroad stretched from the east coast of the United States to the west coast. No longer would people travel in long wagon trains that took months to reach California. They could now travel faster, safer, and cheaper by train. In addition to people, things like mail, supplies, and trade goods could now be shipped across the country in just a few days. The railroad was built between 1863 and 1869. The first talk of a transcontinental railroad started around 1830. One of the first promoters of the railroad was a merchant named Asa Whitney. Asa tried hard for many years to get Congress to pass an act to build the railroad, but failed. However, in the 1960s, Theodore Judah began to lobby for a railroad. He surveyed the Sierra Nevada mountains and found a pass where the railroad could be built. Now, there were two main routes along which people wanted the first railroad to be built. One route was called the Central Route. It followed much the same route as the Oregon Trail. It would begin in Omaha, Nebraska, and end up in Sacramento, California. The other route was the Southern Route. This route would stretch across Texas, New Mexico, and end up in Los Angeles, California. The Central Route was evenly chosen by Congress. or eventually, not evenly. Sorry, guys. The Central route was eventually chosen by Congress. And you can see the routes here. Union Pacific, Central Pacific. And then later, they completed that. Now, the Pacific Railroad Act, in 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law. The act said that there were two main railroad lines. The Central Pacific Railroad would come from California, and the Union Pacific Railroad would come from the Midwest. The two railroads would meet somewhere in the middle. The act gave the railroad companies land where they could build the railroad. It also paid them for each mile that they built. They were paid more money, more miles of track built in the mountains versus miles of track on the flat plains, which makes sense because it would have been harder to build track in the mountains versus the flat plains, right? Building the railroad was tough, hard work. Weather conditions were especially tough in the mountains during the winter. A lot of times, the only way to travel over the mountains was to go through the mountains by blasting a tunnel. The Central Pacific Railroad had to blast a number of tunnels to the Sierra Nevada mountains. The longest tunnel built was 1,659 feet long. It took a long time to build the tunnels. They were able to blast around 1 foot per day on average. While the Central Pacific Railroad had to deal with the mountains and snow, the Union Pacific Railroad had to deal with Native Americans. As the Native Americans came to realize the threat to their way of life that the iron horse was going to bring, they began to raid the railroad work sites. Also, a lot of the land was granted to the railroad by the government. It was actually Native American land. Now, the majority of the workers on the Union Pacific Railroad were Irish laborers, many who had served in both the Union and the Confederate armies. In Utah, a lot of the track was built by Mormon workers. Most of the Central Pacific Railroad was built by Chinese immigrants. The two railroads finally met at the summit in Utah on May 10, 1869. Leland Stanford, governor of California and president of the Central Pacific Railroad, drove in the last spike. This final spike was called the Golden Spike, or the Final Spike. And you can see it today at Stanford University in California. And there's a little picture. Now, guys, I hope you find this interesting as I do. I want you to get a piece of paper out. And you don't have to write the questions or anything, but I want you to record your answers to the quiz. And we're going to review this Friday, okay? So pause the video, get a piece of paper and a pencil, come back. All right, now that you guys have pencil and paper, question 1, just write down number 1. During which decade was the first Transcontinental Railroad constructed? And you can write the answer. Is it 1790s, 1820s, 1860s, 1910s, or 1940s? And just write the answer. Number 2, which route did Congress select for the first Transcontinental Railroad? Was it the southern route, the northern route, the westward route, the middle route, or the central route? Write down which route you think it was. Number 3, which president signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law? Was it Abraham Lincoln, James Polk, John Tyler, Andrew Johnson, or Thomas Jefferson? And you can record which one of the presidents signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law. Number 4, what railroad company started in California and worked their way east? Was it California Railroad, Central Pacific Railroad, West Coast Railroad, Union Pacific Railroad, or the Sacramento Railroad? And remember, we talked about that. So what railroad company started in California and worked their way east? Write down your answer. Guys, if you need to go back and read the article, you can do that. It's ducksters.com/history westward expansion. First Transcontinental Railroad. The link, you can see it right here at the top of the page, right there. And you can also see it on the slideshow that I clicked on. All right. Now, number 5 says, how were the railroad companies paid? Were they paid by the hour, by the year, by the day, by the mile, or they built the railroad for free? So which one of those is that? Okay. Number 6 says, most of the workers for the Pacific or Union Pacific Railroad came from what country? And when we talked about immigration, guys, we talked about which immigrants went and did what. And if you recall that, then you'll have the answer, but we also read it in this article. Most of the workers from the Union Pacific Railroad came from what country? Was it Ireland, Italy, Russia, Africa, or were the workers Native Americans? Number 7, true or false? Native Americans were happy to have a railroad running through their land. True or false? Now, were the Native Americans happy to have the railroad running through their land? Yes or no? Number 8, in what state did the two railroads finally meet? Was it California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, or Colorado? What state did the two railroads finally meet? And number 9, around how long was the first Transcontinental Railroad? Was it 299 miles, 507 miles, 914 miles, 1,776 miles, or 3,045 miles? So how long was the first Transcontinental Railroad? Which one of these? We have one more question, number 10. Which of the following was not a state that the railroad passed through? So it says, which of the following was not a state that the railroad passed through? So Utah, Nebraska, California, Nevada, or Oregon? Which one of those did the railroad not pass through? Okay. And again, guys, you can access this article from Duxters.com. Websites at the top, history/westward expansion/First Continental Railroad. Okay. And you can go through and you can read it for yourself, or it has a really nice feature at the bottom. If you hit that play button, it'll read you this whole article, okay? And then it'll give you a link to the quiz I just read. But I want you to write down the answers to your quiz, okay? I need to move my little recording thing out of the way so I can get back to my slide. All right. Now what I want you to do, when we meet on Friday, you need to have that quiz answered, okay? Also, you need to visit Khan Academy and do your multiplication. The class code is right here. When we met on Wednesday, we showed you how to go to Khan Academy and complete your lessons. You're going to do your multiplication lesson there. The class code is N23PX8TR, okay? And again, the Transcontinental Railroad quiz that I just read, okay? Also, guys, you need to be reading every day. Try to take at least 2 AR tests a week, okay? Science A to Z, complete 1 lesson. It'd be nice, guys, if you complete 1 lesson per day. Now, I assign the videos and readings, and most of the readings have little quizzes, usually only 10 questions. So try to do 1 lesson a day. And it would be great if you could do 20 minutes of ready math and reading each day, okay? It's not a whole lot. All right, guys, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me an email, phone call, get a hold of me, okay? All right, guys. We'll see you later.